We interrupt this program to bring you an important Wayfair message. Wayfair's got style tips for every home. This is Nicole Byer, helping you make those rooms flyer. Today's style tip: when it comes to making a statement, treat bold patterns like neutrals. Go wild! Like an untamed animal print area rug under a rustic farmhouse table from Wayfair.com. Ooh, fierce! This has been your Wayfair style tip to keep those interiors superior.
Wayfair, every style, every home.
This is VSiN By The Books on VSiN, the sports betting network.
And we begin the Wednesday edition, VSiN By The Books. Dave Ross here, downtown Las Vegas, Nevada. He's our closer, Jensen Lewis, back home in Cleveland, Ohio. And Darnell was just saying as we were coming on the air, it's the last day of April. We've made it almost to May. I mean, it's wild when you look back at April, and I would say it's maybe a top 3 sporting month of the year when you put all the things together and the confluence of you go from Augusta National, you've got Daytona, you've got certainly the beginning really of Major League Baseball, the NFL draft. It's a pretty darn good month. But Jensen, now we get into May as we begin tomorrow, and I do want to ask, how do we view now? When are the dog days of baseball in summer truly upon us?
Oh, definitely end of July and August, because, you think about where teams are that are probably eliminated, usually waving the white flag there in the trade deadline, and you're just playing out the string there. For other teams, it's the second wind, right? But it's still everyone's feeling bumps and bruises. Everyone's tired. Everyone's fatigued. And so you get to September 1st. And usually that's when you have call-ups and you get that fresh little shot of energy. The veterans kind of, kick it up a notch because you get the young pups in there that don't know what they're doing and are, being idiots in the clubhouse, and you got to rail it in and like, all right, here we go. This is how you do it at the big league level. But you're right. Not only the end of the month, my friend, but Derby, for those that don't know, if you go to Netflix, Race for the Crown, because it is Derby week.
Yeah.
Buddy, Michelle and I were binging the entire thing. Yes, we got through the entire thing except for the final episode. It is wild. It is wild. The arena of horse racing, the world, the culture. I don't know if it's as wild as what happened with the Bucks and the Pacers last night, but it is good, man. I would highly encourage people to take a look at it before Saturday.
Pretty darn exciting. Yeah, of course, the Derby coming up this Saturday. We got a great show lined up for you today. One of my favorite markets out there, and we've been kind of waiting for this. It's kind of like a Christmas Day every beginning of the month. So we're going to break down the most wins in May. I know Gil Alexander is going to do it on his show later on today on a numbers game as well. So we'll break down what we like and the numbers associated because they come out. We were texting with Mike Palm yesterday. Mike, when are they going to be out? Boom, they come out. They hit you in the afternoon. They're only going to be up until games begin tomorrow. So you have a really limited window there. Paul Caponegri is going to join us as well to break down the NHL Stanley Cup playoffs and some crazy turns that we saw again last night. How about Adam Burke from the Diamond? We'll catch up with Berkey there. Indians get another win last night. Guardians get another win last night, 2-1 over the Twins. I'll get used to that eventually. And then Wes Reynolds is going to join us for our Wednesdays with Wes, breaking down the Byron Nelson. It feels like a one-horse race with Scotty Scheffler if you look at the odds market, and then everybody else is as deeper odds at 18-1. But we do begin, Jensen, with something you alluded to in our highlights and headlines.
Help your bottom line with today's highlights and headlines.
I don't believe what I just saw, in the immortal words of the great late Jack Buck. I really, you cannot make this stuff up with what looks like you got a 7-point lead in overtime for the Milwaukee Bucks to extend the series against Indiana. You're going to go back and play a Game 6, and then all of a sudden, somehow, some way, critical turnovers, and Milwaukee, they don't even get to a second overtime, Jensen. They blow a 7-point lead in the last 40 seconds and lose, and they are eliminated. Again, you got to see it to believe it. Can you believe it?
I want to know what, at some books, what was the highest money line number you could have gotten on the Pacers?
30-1. 30-1 is what I was seeing in the last 40 seconds.
And not that any of us would have taken it because you felt like, okay, Milwaukee's got to at least do it. This was shades of Houston in the national title game, right? Could not get a shot up, but even worse, you have back-to-back possessions where you turn the ball over, and credit where it's due. Andrew Nembhard hits the three and gets it to 4. Okay, with 34 seconds left, so that you get the timeout for the Bucks to advance the ball. Gary Trent with just a bad pass on Nembhard gets a steal there as well, and then Halliburton gets the hoop and the harm, and so now you're like, as Paulie Howard always says, squeaky bum time now. So I just. Again, a lot of this comes down to coaching, right? But also players on the court got to be able to execute. For whatever happened to Gary Trent, there needs to be an examination of the brain on what the decision-making process was, what was firing, what wasn't. Credit where it's due. Halliburton hits the layup at the end, and that's how the Bucs season ends. But ultimately, my friend, we've had some wild finishes to the postseason. Not only NBA with just a night or so ago with the Gordon, and was still touching the fingertips or not. This an all-timer though. I don't know how you come back from this if you're a Milwaukee Bucks fan.
Well, and that's the thing now. And again, you go to the offseason, the questions there are going to all be about Giannis Antetokounmpo. What's going to happen there? Obviously, he's still under contract, but. I always have said for well over a decade, the great Doc Rivers. You don't say Doc Rivers without saying the great Doc Rivers. And yes, a lot of that is tongue in cheek, but how much of that is Doc? How much of that is Gary Trent? But you just go, Gary played a great game, sadly, but that's what's going to be remembered. The end of that game. Weird things just seem to happen with Doc Rivers ever since he left Boston back when they won the one championship. And I do look at it at certain coaches, Jensen, that we go, that guy's a great coach. That guy can't coach. But that title does seem to get you a lot of leeway out there. We were talking about yesterday with Mike Sullivan. The guy wins back-to-back Stanley Cups. He's out after 10 years. Doc Rivers won that championship over a decade ago and still getting jobs. So it is interesting. Mike Budenholzer wins a title in Milwaukee with Giannis. And now he's just getting fired in Phoenix. So it's bizarre how certain coaches with still one title and some with multiple are looked at. But Doc, for whatever reason, cannot seem to figure this out. Couldn't figure it out with the Clippers. Can't figure it out here with the Bucks. I'll be very curious to see what their offseason looks like. Meanwhile, for Indiana now, they move on into the second round. By the way, Boston, a little struggle to begin, trailed at halftime, and then second half put it on Orlando to eliminate the Magic in 5 games as well, 120-89 the final there. And so they move on to the second round. And if you played that money line parlay, we said the one that could bite you would be the Pistons. It's the one that bit you last night as they get a 106-103 win in the Garden and extend that series. That's going to go back to Detroit for a Game 6 now. Unexpected, right? We totally. I did not expect this series to go back to Detroit. That's for sure. But I guess you can make the claim now through 5 games, even though the Knicks have the 3-2 lead. You can make the argument Detroit's been the better team overall, even though right now the series score would not indicate that.
I would think that as you look through how this series has transpired, first and foremost, the Celtics are excited that the Knicks have to play another game, right. But sort of what we expected, right? This was the upstart Pistons team that, hey, some people even thought had a chance to win this series, and they're still alive, they're still kicking, now get to go back home and try and get this thing to a Game 7. I think what you look at is the leadership of Cade Cunningham, almost a triple-double in his own right, just a couple rebounds and assists short there. But, now you ask about the depth, and I know we've talked with JVT about it. How deep do the Knicks go? And as the series goes on, it's not just this series, Dave, right? It's the more minutes you got to play, the deeper you go in the postseason. We know how deep the Celtics are. Again, this is just playing right into Boston's hands here, that if the Pistons are able to force a Game 7, my goodness, what's that series price look like, even though it's a 2-3 matchup? So anxious to see where Game 6 ends up here for Detroit. But, man, what a fun game. Nip and tuck all the way, and Detroit gets it done.
And, by the way, that Game 6 tomorrow night in Detroit, the Pistons are 2-point favorites to do just that, Jensen, and extend this to a 7th game. And that total sitting there at 213. So Detroit not dead, not by a long shot. And how about Denver? Really put it on the Clippers last night. to take a 3-2 lead there. So, like, the first 2 wins they had in that series, you don't want to say they're miraculous, but you get the overtime win in Game 1. You get the buzzer beater, Aaron Gordon, Nikola Jokic is an alley-oop. Doesn't matter. They get the win even after review. But then last night, they look like a team that's won a championship in the last couple of years here as they roll L.A. They are 6.5-point underdogs tomorrow night in a Game 6 back in the Clipper joint in L.A. But still, I think you have to be more encouraged now by Denver in that coaching turmoil at the end of the year here, Jensen. Maybe they're starting to figure something out.
Well, what it is I mean, Jamal Murray healthy.
Yeah.
I mean, that's the compliment that Nikola Jokic has been used to when they go on deep playoff runs. So a spectacular individual effort there. And we looked at that game as potentially a defensive battle. Dear God, as Tom Hamilton would say, a swing and a miss. That one soars over, and I guess now the thought process, if you are the Clippers. The start to the game, I think, is the most troubling part for me in yesterday. And being down 12 after the first quarter, they do come back to trim the lead a little bit, but still have that 8-point deficit at halftime. To me, that's the key, and that would be the handicap looking forward, is the sense of urgency. Yes, it's a closeout game for Denver. I think LA just to feel good about themselves. I don't think they've been kind of happy with where they've started most of this series. So that would be an angle I would look at, kind of that first quarter spread headed into Game 6.
Yeah, 43-7 for Jamal Murray in the win. And you mentioned that Kawhi was good. I mean, the numbers look good, right? 29 and 11, almost a triple-double. But I'm with you. It never felt like that was one you could kind of earmark after the third quarter. Once you don't make it a run, you're down 16 going to the fourth, that this thing is pretty much put to bed. And it was. The Nuggets 131-115 winners there. So some series did get finalized as we imagined, maybe not the way we thought they'd get finished, like Indiana getting that done 119 and 118. The Celtics, the big winners last night, they move on 120-89. Easy victory there. When we come back, let's break it down. How do we handicap the best record in May? It's basically a 30-day sprint to cashing a big ticket. We'll break down some numbers that we like. That is next when you come back with us. It's VSiN By The Books.
We interrupt this program to bring you an important Wayfair message. Wayfair's got style tips for every home. This is Nicole Byer, helping you make those rooms flyer. Today's style tip: when it comes to making a statement, treat bold patterns like neutrals. Go wild! Like an untamed animal print area rug under a rustic farmhouse table from Wayfair.com. Ooh, fierce! This has been your Wayfair style tip to keep those interiors superior.
Wayfair, every style, every home.
You're tuned in to VSiN By The Books, right here on VSiN.
We are back, VSiN By The Books, on this Wednesday edition. Dave Ross, Jensen Lewis, and this is, I'd say, relatively newish market in Major League Baseball. Look, no run first inning, yes run first inning. We've had kind of, I want to say, new inventions, if you will, in the world of baseball betting. And it's a lot of fun, right? Because it's different ways to attack if you don't want to just play first five, or play full game, obviously sides and totals. In the last couple of years, these monthly choices they've been giving out here in Las Vegas and beyond are best records in individual months. Now, again, I didn't play the first one because we had the 2 games in March. So you had different books that had different offerings, whether it's going to be March and April, if you had just April, if you're not going to. So there were so many different ways, Jensen, to navigate that. By the way, if you did play it for March and April, the Mets are sitting in that catbird seat to get it done with 1 day to go, today being the last day of April. But you and I, we're like, hey, let's start looking ahead next week. This was us talking last week, because that offering is going to come in the middle of the week. A lot of people are going to forget about this. They're going to wake up tomorrow, and once that first pitch hits, they're going to go, I didn't get in my best regular season win total for May. But you and I have been waiting for this. It finally comes out. And let's show you some of the odds that are associated with it. And I think what the hardest thing to do, Jensen, really is you look at the numbers blindly, and you go, my goodness, why wouldn't I play a Brewers at 53-1? Or, a Blue Jays got off to a good start at 50. These huge numbers, you see the short shots here. The Cubs are plus 425. Dodgers, obviously, because how talented we know they are, no matter what month, plus 850 or 875. Phillies, we'll talk about them at plus 1050. Padres 10-1, and down the road. But Jensen, I do think the real trick is, how do you navigate your schedule for that month, right? And in May, it's unlike a couple of the other months that we'll get to this summer where you have the trade deadline implications. It feels like the last month where you really don't have to take that into consideration. What are the parameters you look for before you start to break down that schedule?
Yeah, first of all, and again, with the off days here, you will have teams that will play fewer games in the actual calendar month. So always remember that is part of it. Do you weigh more of wanting more chances to win more games or fewer chances to lose fewer games? Again, so right. To each their own on that. And again, the opponents are now with the balanced schedule, Dave, it does change things a little bit, because as it was beforehand, where you had the overweight portion of those division games where you're playing 19 times. Well, now you're playing 6 fewer games against your division, and you're playing every team at least once throughout the season. So that's something to factor in as well. And how does that fall in the month of May? The other things I try and look for too, statistically, and we hear this a lot in soccer, recent form, right? How are teams going? So the first team I circled, your New York Mets. Okay. And again, their schedule headed in, they're going to finish up. Kind of a weird way to start May, but they finish up a 4-game set against the Arizona Diamondbacks beginning the month of May tomorrow. Then they go on the road against St. Louis in Arizona before they come back home and play the Cubs. That's kind of a tough stretch to start. And then you kind of look through the middle portion here, and you're like, I don't know if I want Yankees, Red Sox, Dodgers, but you have Pirates, you have White Sox, you have Rockies. Okay, we've got a pretty even offset, if you will. The other statistics that I look at, obviously rotation ERA, how deep are your starters getting in, bullpen usage, are guys overworked headed into the month, and then runs scored. Is your offense scoring consistently? We talked about this in the NCAA tournament. We'd rather err on a team that can score than a team that can, or a team that struggles to do that day in and day out. So the Mets were a pick for me, and that was the first team that I looked at.
I love that. And again, I like the way you broke it down. Yes, you go, man, Yankees, Red Sox, Dodgers, but that is offset. I'm with you with the Pirates, White Sox, and Rockies. So it does feel advantageous for the Metropolitans. And again, that pitching that the Mets have had so far, and they might actually get some help coming pretty soon. I wonder if they can get that in May. But they haven't even needed it so far, so I like where your head's at there. I did go to the Royals with the pitching equation. They got back to 500 with a win last night against Tampa. It's one of those longer numbers out there, too. I saw 40-1s at Circa. And I looked at their schedule coming up in this month, and they're going to finish up, as you mentioned here, against the Rays. It'll be the last game. They got one more today in April. And then they'll finish up against Tampa down there. And then, boy, the Orioles have just not been the Orioles. So that doesn't feel as daunting to me to go to Charm City, right? Then you get back home against the Sox, the white ones and the red ones, coming in there. Houston's been a little bit down so far at the beginning of the year. We know the Cardinals have already come back to what we think they are. Look, Giants have been a much bigger surprise than maybe what we thought. That could be tough. Then at the Twins, very doable. Boy, I hate going up against our Reds, and we'll talk about them too. But that does feel like maybe a 50-50 wash, and it gets tougher right at the end. But I really do think for the majority of the month of May, if the Royals can figure out a little bit of that offense that you talked about, I think at 40-1, it's worth a play for me for a longer shot here, and that's why I circle Kansas City on my schedule.
Yeah, I think it's great. And again, that's kind of the play, is that the regression of the offense, starts to go positively in your direction, because that's been really the bane of their existence thus far in 2025. So I love it. And just from a scheduling standpoint, absolutely advantageous for you to take advantage of. Speaking of pitching, I went to the Mariners. Circa had them, I believe, upwards of 25-1. I think they're at plus 27-25 headed into this morning. No doubt that we look at Seattle, and obviously their bread is buttered on that pitching staff. Mm-hmm. It's been the offense, though, that, as I told you, I know Cody Decker is listening right now because he always does. This offense, okay, they're third in home runs. They're third in on base. They're ninth in runs scored. So we actually have a pulse consistently with this offense. it's actually been the pitching that's been a bit middle of the road statistically. But I just kind of look at this schedule and say, okay, the Athletics should be able to handle them. Blue Jays have been putrid offensively. Yankees are going to be tough. Padres are tough. White Sox stink. Astros are inconsistent. Nats haven't been good. Twins, eh. So this is a very doable schedule here for the Mariners on paper. The offense has to stay consistent. They do enter play today, leading the AL West by 1 game. So you're giving me nearly 30-1 on the Mariners with that pitching staff and the way the offense is, recent form. I'll absolutely take a shot on the M's most wins in May.
I think you and I kind of align with, like, we know the pitching's going to keep minimum, and the offense has been there for the M's. It has not been there for my Royals for a little bit of a longer ticket, so I need that Royals offense to be kind of what the Mariners offense has been, more surprising for one of those 2 tickets to get home there. The other one that I did look at, again, you and I kind of formulated this before we saw the numbers, and then when I see the number, I go, do I want to play the Phillies at plus 1050, plus 1075. Well, this is why I looked at them, and even as a diehard Metropolitan fan, we're trying to win some money here. Look, the Nationals, we saw the comeback the Phillies had against the Nats yesterday. Nats have been spunky, but it's just 1 game there. And then the Diamondbacks, we know how good they can be. Is Tampa Bay going to come back to earth a little bit? They've been pretty good at home. And then Cleveland hasn't been the same Guardians so far this year. Again, I'm going to attack the Cardinals and the Pirates and the Rockies and the Athletics. Ooh, I really like those 4 series stretches there in the middle of May, and then it gets a little bit tougher at the end against the Braves and the Brewers. But I just think for a team that's playing chase right now to the Mets, you get to the middle of the month there with the Pirates, Rockies, A's, and Braves. Can you go 10-2 in that stretch? Something along those lines. You're going to be probably right there in the mix if you're the Phillies, and you can take care of business. Now, got to win those games against those bad teams. They all matter the same. But if they can get through that and really flex their muscles there, and then maybe hold water against the Braves and the Brewers at the end of the schedule, I do sadly think that the Phillies could be in play. If you can get them close to 11-1, I think it's a pretty fair number. One other team very quickly, the Reds, that I did not officially make a play on, but Jensen, I looked at them hard because I want to play them. They're a real long shot, north of 65-1. Could we make a case for a pizza money bet on the Reds?
Yeah. Can I interest you in a team that's won 5 in a row at this point? They're going to play a double dip today because they got rained out yesterday. This offense, 5th scoring offense in the big leagues, 5th best rotation ERA in baseball. You know where I'm going here. It's that bullpen that we're going to have Heart Attack Central trying to close these out because they've given away a few already in April. But at 68, what is it? 68.50 plus 68.50. Absolutely will be in on it. Tito usually has these adjustments in place moving forward. I'm telling you, man, I would rather err on a team that is going to go through the Nationals. Yes, they get a tough road trip against the Braves and the Astros. Then they come home against the White Sox, the Guardians. They go to Pittsburgh. They have the Cubs twice to end the month and the Royals. I've seen worse, but they got a real shot, man. Absolutely. At that number, would love to have a sweat headed into the final week.
Sold. I mean, people won't even wait to catch a futures ticket for the regular season wins in the NFL now. They're so impatient. This is 30 days, people. It's all it is. 30 days. So you got to get those tickets in before first pitch tomorrow. All these obviously will come down at that point. All right, all you have to do each and every day, check out VSiN.com. If you've not become a VSiN Pro subscriber, you can do so right now. You're going to get full access all summer long, all the way through August 1st for just $59. i.e., when you log in today at VSiN.com. Kentucky Derby, got a betting guide there for you. Hoops Peterson's got you covered in baseball. We got that CJ Cup preview. Wes Reynolds, Wednesdays with Wes. He'll join us as well. Zachary Cohen with his NBA picks and player props. The Iceman coming with JD, Jonathan Davis on his night on the ice, and Steve Makinen, MLB Analytics Report. It's $59, covers you all the way through August 1st.
You're tuned in to VSiN By The Books, right here on VSiN.
We are back, VSiN By The Books. Dave Ross, Jensen Lewis here. Going to have Paul Caponigri to join us in hour number 2 to break down the night on ice that we saw last night, what we're going to see once we get into the second round. And we're starting to get there with the closeout last night. Carolina in double OT, once trailing the Devils 3-0, come all the way back, get this one done. Sebastian Aho with the game winner in double overtime. Celebrate Carolina. You don't cash that puck line. Obviously, once you hit overtime there, but you do get it on the money line. Big number to lay at 258. It gets home late. Jensen, 3-0 Devils after one, not in one, but after one. So all you got to do, 40 minutes of hockey, is get this thing done, Jersey, and you get it back there for a Game 6. They can't do it. A big second period as Carolina came back to tie it. Then you kind of went back forth, 4-4, scoreless third before getting it done in double OT. I guess you can exhale if you're Carolina. You get through this thing in 5. But if you're Jersey, it's kind of like the Bucks last night where you go, like, come on, man, we got to be able to figure out a way to close this thing out and get it back to Jersey for a Game 6.
Again, we had highlighted the Carolina, the last few days and also at the end of last week. Like, no one is talking about the Hurricanes right now. That's a sleepy series. Yeah. They're just taking care of business. It takes them some extra periods to get it done yesterday, but now they get to kind of sit and wait here. And as you kind of forecast the bracket out, the Canadiens obviously going to try and give Washington everything they can handle in a closeout scenario tonight. But man, what an impressive comeback. One that I think a lot of people looked at, obviously Toronto in the East and Washington with the historic year that they had with Ovechkin and just the overall performance that maybe not a lot of people saw coming. But I think this is the team, and I think I told you beginning of the week, if you wanted to jump in on anyone in the East, that's the team to do it. And so they are the first team into the second round, and anxious to see how that Caps and Canadiens game will play out tonight.
And here's what's interesting about that, what you made mention of. If you want to hop in on Carolina, they are now the favorites to win the Stanley Cup. Now, again, because you have now moved on into the second round where a lot of these teams, TBD, obviously, but they are the shortest shots right now, plus 425 to win the Cup. Florida still up. They're at 5-1 to win this. VGK, they get an overtime win last night against Minnesota. They're plus 750 as the first betting choice here out west. And right there on their heels are the Dallas Stars at 8-1 with their 3-2 lead here over Carolina. You mentioned Toronto. What happened last night? So you get shut out at home, 4-0 when you can close this thing out. Now you got to go back to Ottawa and play the Sens here in a Game 6. And I will just say this. To say that I saw consternation on the X time machine from Toronto fans would be an understatement. I saw people saying they're going to give up their fandom after last night. The team doesn't care. Again, I always say if they don't care, I don't care. But Jensen, are Maple Leafs fans looking for a bridge to jump off? You're ahead 3-2. I know this is not the way you wanted last night to go, losing at home, being shut out 4-0, and looking uncompetitive in the process. Is this a one-night blip, and that they're going to be back to being Toronto? Because I think people thought at 3-1, 2 of the last 3, if you need them, are at home. Like, the ghosts of playoff pass are not going to come back to rear their ugly heads. But for one night, I guess I can understand why there's a little bit of panic in Toronto.
The ghosts of playoff pass are in the driveway, my friend. They have exited the vehicle, and they are headed towards the front door, because if you look at the track record, and yet again, yesterday, another opportunity in a closeout game for the Toronto Maple Leafs. Oof. I think they've only won one, in their last 15 attempts. It's pretty significant here. And so if you're Ottawa, and again, just thinking about it from a betting perspective, if you think Ottawa gets this done, I mean, they're going to be, perhaps a short favorite. I'll check the numbers here coming up. Sure. But I would believe that, minus $1.20 right now, short favorite tomorrow. And then you would assume they're an underdog in Game 7 in Toronto. If they get it there, you might as well just roll over the money line if you think the collapse can happen yet again. There's way more pressure on Toronto to try and get this done. And, Rachel Dory told us that we felt it could be 7 home games for Toronto. Well, they're going to need everything. I don't know. Could you imagine if we're Maple Leaf fans headed in to that barn for Game 6 tomorrow, and we're, it's the nervous energy. It's the, here we go again. And if they go down early, and what the Sens fan base is going to be, oh boy.
Well, this is house money for Ottawa, isn't it?
Yes.
When you win the way you won last night, 4-0, And then you see the reaction, the visceral reaction that some Maple Leaf fans are having, to the point of, if this gets back to Toronto for a Game 7, I'm not saying they're looking to boo their own team. Yeah. But if it got off to a bad start, you could see that scenario of like, oh, my goodness, I'm done. I'm out in this franchise. I can't do this each and every year with this team. And again, for people here in the United States that might not get the severity of it and the reason why there's so much panic there, you can make that claim. This is the New York Yankees of Canadian hockey, right? This is the Lakers. This is that equivalent, the Dallas Cowboys, of franchises that live and died and more often die than live with this franchise year after year. And if this happens again, and you go up to Ottawa, and again, Ottawa $1.20 here in Game 6. Ottawa, by the way, to win the East now, Jensen, I don't know that I'd want to play this. This is unlike something we'll get to here in a sec with Edmonton. But if you want to play Ottawa right now to win the East, they're 30-1. You want them to win the Cup, they're 80-1. Now, look, I don't think either one of those two things are going to happen, but that does dovetail with what Toronto fans would say is the inevitable collapse of our franchise. I don't see it the same way, but I'm picking up what they're putting down.
And again, from a short-term perspective, this is where if Ottawa does pull the unthinkable here, at least in Toronto Maple Leaf fans' minds, roll the money line. Yeah. Look at the series price, coming up in round 2 against whoever wins between the Lightning and the Panthers. And then you kind of see where you are, because if there are places that will offer you a cash out, you may want to look to that, because imagine if Ottawa takes a lead 1-0 in the opening game of that second round against either Tampa or Florida. Again, just another way to look at it. Will it happen? Hey, we got to get there first. But we have seen this movie for Maple Leaf fans. Yes. And it's time. Your stars got to step up. I mean, Austin Matthews has to get in there and be like, all right, Johnny Tavares, let's go. I mean, you got to, at some point you put your foot down, like it stops here. Right. It absolutely stops here. We got to lace it up and we got to go, fellas, because this is embarrassing, especially on home ice.
Okay. Now let's make the equivalent in the West, because there was a ticket that you and I talked about last week once Edmonton was down 0-2 to the Kings. And I'm looking around the different shops and I'm seeing north of $4 just to win this series, not to win the West. Right. And then all of a sudden, it dipped back down. I think people were reading what our read might have been, that, look, if you wanted Edmonton there, and I get it, they'd shown no signs of life down 0-2 to the Kings early on in L.A., and then all of a sudden now they've come all the way back, and then they might – talk about history repeating, right? With Toronto, this could be history repeating again with Edmonton knocking out the Kings in the first round. They get a defensive win last night, 3-1 in L.A. They now lead this series 3-2. They can wrap this thing up north of the border back home in Edmonton, and they're favorites to do just that now here, Jensen. I do have fear of missing out on this one, that I did not play that ticket. They're $1.62 to get this done tomorrow night. You want to go in the puck line there, you can get that juicier plus $1.64, and the totals come down to 5.5, and that one is juiced to the over. But all of a sudden, it's kind of like if you just show a little bit of defense, everybody trusts Edmonton's offense. What do we make now of not just this series, but bigger picture for the Oilers?
Well, I think it was Jonathan Davis's sage advice that anytime you have Connor McDavid or Evan Draisaitl on your squad, you have a fighting chance. Mm-hmm. Listen, Darcy Kemper actually stopped 43 shots. Okay, just gives you an idea of the onslaught that Edmonton's offense put on the netminder there for the Kings. And so I don't think that wanes whatsoever here in Game 6, an opportunity at home, as you mentioned, for Edmonton to get it done. I think it's more of you and I know for me, I've got a VGK a ticket. I have a couple of tickets actually on them. I'm hoping, just selfishly, that with VGK getting the OT win against the Wild, that they can close it out in Game 6. I want a Game 7 no matter what, and obviously want the Kings to win with my 22-1 future. But a lot of different ways to play this here. If you want to jump in on Edmonton, the time is now, because you would imagine that I mean, what would you make the series favorite there between if VGK gets it done and then Edmonton? I mean, you got two behemoths right there headed at each other on a collision course. Small favorite, I would lean towards VGK, and it's reflected even right now. Than, right? Yeah, if you're Edmonton. Yeah, absolutely. And it's reflected right now to win the West with the VGK having that 3-2 lead
over Minnesota. And Edmonton now with that 3-2 lead. VGK is the small favorite, plus 350. Edmonton plus 370 with the Dallas Stars at 370. So we got a three-headed monster there. And, wow, it's just wild. The Derby's going to be wild on Saturday. You want to bet it, you can bet on hundreds of horse races each and every day at firstbet.com. That's the number one, stbet.com. Use the promo code VSiN200 for new users. You're going to grab a $200 sign-up bonus right then and there. So sign up today at firstbet.com.
Tuned in to VSiN By The Books, right here on VSiN.
We continue VSiN By The Books. Dave Ross, Jensen Lewis here on a Wednesday edition of getting closer now to the second round of the NBA playoffs. The debate rages on, which is the better of the two, NHL or the NBA. They've both been pretty good. Different. They're different in their own rights. I'm kind of going to the Will Hill strategy of why can't we all just get along and we appreciate it for what it is. But that's not fun, right, Jensen? You want to say our side's better. That's the more fun in the debate. But the NBA playoffs have been pretty good. If you're a Denver Nuggets fan, I guess you go, wow, 3-2 here. Remember they were at 2-2 before last night where they beat up the Clippers pretty darn good to take that 3-2 lead. They were plus money, if you remember our conversation 24 hours ago, to win this series. And I thought, Jensen, that's interesting because theoretically they went 2 of the last 3 at home, and yet they were the dog. Do you think the market, have they misguided a little bit of what the Nuggets are? And look, they're 7-point dogs tomorrow night in Clipperland to have this series theoretically be extended back to 7 for Denver. But it does feel like even last night, they were 1.5 favorites, and now they're 7-point dogs. That every game, the books are looking to the Clippers still as the better team.
Yeah, I think that's right, and I'd be anxious to talk to a Jeffrey Benson, even Carl Johnson down there, Beau Rivage, because I know he gets a lot. He had said he gets a lot of the NBA handle down there as well with the Thunder, but I wonder how they offset it with some liability here, because we know that a lot of people were jumping on the Clippers, from a future standpoint. Yes. And then, how many people did have Denver in pocket earlier when we saw what the Thunder were doing in the regular season? So as it pertains, and I'm not sure that factors in on a day-to-day or game-to-game basis, but I do feel that a lot more of these lines, especially when the Clippers are at home, are okay. We just finally got a Jamal Murray performance. I mean, it's 43 there. We're not going to see that every night, but there really hadn't been anyone else outside of Jokic that has consistently performed the way that, Norman Powell has outside of Kawhi, and, Zubac has been phenomenal for the Clippers in this series. So that to me is something to factor in here, because Denver still has the pedigree. They still have that team that's been deep into the postseason. They know what to do. Is there more pressure on Denver to get it done? Probably not, because everyone's talking about the Clippers. I think that was to an advantage. But as far as this line goes, and it's already down to 6.5 here at DraftKings. I know we're seeing 7s at Circa. I think the under, again, I know we got just decimated by it yesterday. There was a boatload of offense, but at 213 down to 212.5 there at Circuit, that's intriguing to me. Again, I still feel defense is going to rue the day here. Yeah. When you look ultimately where this series finally ends up.
Here's another really interesting point before we look at tonight's games, because they're all out west here tonight with the Warriors and the Rockets and the Timberwolves and the Lakers. But you can get a better number right now on the Nuggets to win the West than you could have before the series began. It's bizarre. They're 13-1. Clippers obviously are now 15-1, down 3-2. But it's just a $2 move in the Western Conference to come out of the West. Now remember, the T-Wolves right before we were kind of looking at them, they're around 20-1 in the marketplace before the playoffs started. They've been shorted now with this 3-1 lead down to 8-1 as the third betting choice out West. OKC has gone up even higher, minus $1.80 now. Remember that you could have gotten them around $1.05 before the playoffs started, $1.20. It started to drift it up at that point. But the point being is the market still, to my eye, says we don't believe the Nuggets are coming. Even if they win this series, we'll still give you 13-1 right now on a team to come out of the West with a 3-2 lead over the Clippers, and even down 2-3, we're only going to give you 15-1 on the Clippers. So the books still do believe, even down 2-3, the Clippers could still be the team ending up coming out of this. How about the Lakers? They're up against it tonight. They got to win or their season ends. Luka, LeBron, year one now after the big trade. 19-1 for the Lakers to come out of the West. But to win tonight, this number's up to 6. Total's at 209.5. I wonder how the T-Wolves approach this. Because you don't want to put all your eggs in a Game 6 basket, theoretically, back in Minnesota. Is it a little bit of house money tonight that they go in there and kind of let it fly a little bit, play a little loose, or they go, man, we only get a couple opportunities to knock this team out, knock out Luka and LeBron. Let's take shot number 1 tonight.
Oh, I would want to take shot 1 tonight, leave no doubt. And with JJ Redick kind of showing you his hand, I think also some trepidation within that Laker locker room. Remember, he didn't sub, and I think that's a huge narrative to follow throughout this game. Was that JJ Redick kind of went all in anyway, or at least became pot committed, if you will, to show, hey, I don't think anyone on this bench helps me improve my chances putting you on the court to beat this team. So Minnesota's coaching staff obviously going to know from a rotation standpoint that Luka and LeBron are going to play a boatload of minutes because this is their season on the line. So why not force them to have to cover both ends in a big way? You get the Timberwolves out to a double-digit lead in this first quarter, it's not going to be, like the Miami Heat, just finally saying, yep, we got reservations for wherever outside of South Beach. We're out. But I could see there being not a white flag, but there could be a lot of like real bad body language. All right, well, that's it. Minnesota's the team. And one other part here, Dave, you mentioned the futures. If you haven't jumped in on the Timberwolves yet, I mean, 8-1 is still great, considering where their path is at this point. And we asked JVT, yesterday about Rockets Warriors, if the Warriors end up getting this done. And I do think the Rockets find a way to pull this thing out. I mean, Timberwolves Warriors is going to be really, really good. It's going to be a really good series if that eventually is the matchup.
And the Warriors, to that point, they can close it out tonight against the Rockets here in H-Town. The Warriors are the second betting choice here. Again, OKC's minus $1.80. Everybody else is solid plus money, starting with the Warriors at plus 550. So, again, if you're a veteran team, Draymond Green was teetering on getting kicked out in the last one. They're getting 4.5 tonight in H-Town. 203.5 is the total. Yeah, you still have the opportunities to wrap it up if you don't get it done in Houston tonight. But you do get that feeling like Houston is just a little bit too young. Maybe like the T-Wolves were a year ago when Dallas got them out of there. That maybe that's Houston this year. And it's a learning experience, but one that maybe is not actionable here. Do you think it ends tonight? But they are 4.5-point favorites to continue this series.
I think Houston can find a way to get it done. I gave it out yesterday on the show, and if you jumped in on it, it's already a little closing line value here. Gave out under 205. That's officially in pocket for me in this game. It's down to 203.5 at Circa. So again, it's about Houston's backcourt and also just their half court offense. Period. Can they hit shots there? And dear God, if they hit half the free throws that they missed in that previous game, then they're actually, in the fight, as we like to say.
Yeah.
But I do think this series gets prolonged. I do think they find a way to hold serve at home and force this thing back to the Bay Area.
I think people have forgotten that Houston's the 2 seed.
That's the craziest thing, right? Look at those future numbers. This is still astronomical to think of for a 2 seed.
55-1 to win the West.
It's just wild.
It's the 2 seed in the first round. Yes, obviously they're down. 55-1 to win the West. And again, that's the Lakers are the right before them at 19-1. And then look at that demarcation line all the way down to 55-1 for the Rockets. Wow. Meanwhile, in the East, very quickly, because it is starting to take a little bit of form there, obviously with the Celtics moving on, they're $1.45 to win the East. Cavaliers moving on, they're plus $1.60. Knicks still trying to close it out. They are still the third betting option at 17-1. Indiana has moved on, and yet they're 18-1. How about Detroit? 150-1 to win the East. Now, look, again, we talk about numbers that are better as you go. Again, they're down 2-3, so more than likely, we don't think they're going to get out of New York if a Game 7 goes back there. But 151 is actually a longer number than they were before this the series began, because obviously they're in that 2-3 hole. But it does feel like the Big Four. But do we really consider the Knicks part of a Big Four, or the Pacers for that matter? It still feels like the Celtics and the Cavaliers as the Big Two.
Yeah, I just think just the numbers tell you in and of itself. You talk about the line of demarcation between the Thunder, the Warriors, and the T-Wolves. I mean, this is a Grand Canyon size in between Celtics, Cavs at $1.60, and then Knicks 17-1. So no, it's the Celtics, it's the Cavaliers, it's 50 feet of crap, and then there's everyone else, to take a line from Moneyball if Kelly Bidlin is up early today listening.
He's going to chart that one against us. We like to quote movies. Whether you're placing your first bet or you've been playing the ponies for years, VSiN's Kentucky Derby betting guide, it's out. It's got you covered for everything you need before we get to the big race on Saturday. Clear breakdown of how to bet on horse racing, great for beginners. Detailed previews of both the Kentucky Derby and the Kentucky Oats. Best bets from top racing experts to help serious bettors cash in big. The guide is yours with a VSiN Pro subscription. Start today for just $9.99 for your first 30 days of VSiN Pro, including this Derby guide, daily best bets, exclusive bidding splits, and more. Sign up right now. VSiN.com/subscribe. That's VSIN.com/subscribe.